side looks like. We are not the only nation that has had an autocratic takeover. It happened in Poland. It happened in Brazil. It happened where I was ambassador, Czech Republic. All three of those countries got to the other side. They ousted autocratic regimes like Trump and Musk. You know, there's always an oligarch. Right. Whenever you've got a dictator, you got an oligarch by his side.
Got a money bag.
How can we get to the other side like those countries did and not go the way of Hungary or Turkey where they never got them out? There's 1,001 things you can do, but we've done a big study, and we know the 7 things you must do, and that's what we're working on. Number 1, defend the rule of law. That's always what these dictators go for. Number 2, protect elections, because that's how you kick them out. Number 3, you have to fight corruption. Number 4, protect pluralism, and on and on. There's a set of 7 things, and the lawsuits we're bringing, I'm planning 100 this year. 100. The lawsuits we're bringing are designed as part of that. And it's starting to work, because you can't do it in the courts of law alone. You need the court of public opinion. And what did we see this week in parallel with our Treasury lawsuit, that first Treasury case? Peaceful protesters for the first time starting to show up at the Treasury building around the country. Members of Congress for the first time starting to come to protests. So you need that. And even the press, so many others have bent the knee. Too many corporate owners of press have bent the knee, kissed the ring, kowtowed. But the press is waking up. I saw some tougher confrontations this week. So you trigger that immune response of the body politic. Wake up, democracy. And that's what's on the other side, is an awakened democracy. Donald Trump and Elon Musk, peaceful. Donald Trump and Elon Musk can't resist that.
Wonder why. It seems to be you're getting a little bit under Elon Musk's, a little bit under his skin here. He tweeted, he posted on X about you a number of times today. What do you do about that? What do you say in response to it?
Many tweets today.
Many. We're showing them on the screen.
About our work and our case and me from Mr. Musk. Jen, he's supposed to be in charge of government efficiency. How does he have time to do all this tweeting? I think he's not used to being held accountable. But what we're doing in our cases, the case tomorrow under the Constitution, but we also have done dozens of FOIA requests. I applied to be a member of the DOJ. They said I'm not welcome because of my political affiliation. We filed the very first case of any kind against the Trump administration, saying the DOJ was illegal right after Donald Trump was sworn in. We got that Treasury order. We're holding Musk and DOJ and Trump accountable. And Mr. Musk doesn't seem to be used to that. But you know what? I take those tweets as a backhanded compliment, and they are going to spur me on to bring even more litigation when necessary to defend the Constitution and laws from the Trump-Musk chaos campaign.
This is the primal scream of a dying regime. Pray for our enemies, because we're going medieval on these people. You're just not got a free shot on all these networks lying about the people. The people have had a belly full of it. I know you don't like hearing that. I know you try to do everything in the world to stop that, but you're not going to stop it. It's going to happen.
And where do people like that go to share the big lie? MAGA media. I wish in my soul, I wish that any of these people had a conscience.
Ask yourself, what is my task and what is my purpose? If that answer is to save my country, this country will be saved.
War Room. Here's your host, Stephen K. Bannon.
It is Tuesday, 18 February, year of our Lord 2025. This morning's exercise is going to be the following. We're going to go around the horn, as we've been talking about today, the kind of the strategy and structure today. We're going to talk about the structure of what's going on as President Trump has another day of thunder. They're going to be signing, I think, of executive orders, I believe, in Mar-a-Lago this afternoon. I actually think that President Trump may attend, as our own Jack Posobiec is. General Flynn's has his event down in Mar-a-Lago tonight. I think President Trump's sticking around Mar-a-Lago, since everybody seems to have left D.C., the imperial capital, on President's Day weekend. We're going to start about the resistance, and we're going to start with the tip of the spear of the resistance, and through Natalie Winters, our White House correspondent. Since Darren Beattie is now in the government and Raheem Kassam's a restaurateur, it's left to our own Natalie Winters to do the heavy lift. Of course, National Pulse has got great stuff. Revolver's got great stuff. You got to go there every day. And then we're going to get into the geopolitics, what happened in Saudi Arabia, actually massive yesterday. We're going to touch on what happened in Paris with the discussions of the Europeans. And Todd Benson is going to be here because we're going to talk about the geopolitical realignment, the geostrategic realignment, which makes total sense now. Report yesterday highlighted by our own Todd Bensman that the CIA, the Central Intelligence Agency, is starting to, I don't know, focus on the cartel situation in Mexico. And I think that all makes sense as we go through it this morning. I want to start with Natalie Winters. Norm Eisen, why is he important? Why is he now trending all over the place? You've been at this with this guy for many years, right? He goes way back. He's part of the thinking of the color revolution actually in Ukraine in 2014, with Victoria Nuland and Samantha Powers and Ann Applebaum, the three sorority sisters of doom, Macbeth's witches, right? So why is Eisen important, and why is he coming to the forefront today, kind of trending as being one of the leaders of the resistance to the days of thunder, ma'am?
Norm Eisen's reason for existence, his raison d'etre, is protecting democracy. And what you just watched from that MSNBC clip that aired about a week ago, and then that Jen Psaki clip came from last night, shows you just what exactly democracy means to Norm Eisen, which is a purely partisan, politically weaponized term that they use to describe the preferred regimes of the American ruling class. Call it the deep state, call it the permanent political class, call it whatever you want. And Norm Eisen's entire career, through his writings, through his sort of appointments at these DC-based think tanks, through his advocacy, through groups like the States United Democracy Defenders, they have all been about preserving the status quo of quote-unquote democracy. And the best example of this is the fact that Norm Eisen was intimately involved with the first impeachment of President Donald J. Trump. He had actually drafted, I believe, nearly a dozen impeachment articles before President Trump was even sworn in. He then basically provided legal counsel to the Mark Zaids of the world, who essentially then impeached President Trump. So for that man to sit up there and say that he cares so much about democracy, while in the same breath talking about how they can peacefully remove the democratically elected president, Donald J. Trump, and they can't even use the Electoral College lost dunk on him because he won it so overwhelmingly, shows you that is a clarifying moment for who Norm Eisen is. And frankly, I would also look no further than what his group, the States United Democracy Defenders, and their sort of C4 action group, which is the one that is actively suing DOJ as we speak, along with a bunch of other President Trump sort of linked initiatives and policies. But it was this very same group that essentially did, and we'll use MSNBC jargon, a hostile takeover of the Arizona AG office, that's Chris Mays, and weaponized their office to bring the indictments against President Trump, against his supporters, essentially lawfare, go after the Jeff Clarks of the world, and again, provide them essentially raw copy, verbatim, with the lawsuits, with the indictments that they then hurled against MAGA. But if you want to take a step back, because then you get to the global ramifications of this, and that's where you sort of invoke then the color revolution critique of who Norm Eisen is, which that is his bread and butter, right? You have to link what is going on at USAID, what they have done throughout Eastern European countries, particularly when it comes to Ukraine, where 9 out of 10 media outlets are funded by USAID. Yes, 9 out of 10, 90%. Imagine that. Right? That's not War Room. That's Ukrainian foreign ministers admitting to that. But if you read their democracy playbook, which was essentially their blueprint that they've now put out 3 iterations of, the third one, which they then cross-supplied, translated everything that they learned from interfering in regimes abroad, where they admit they're now doing it here in the United States, which was published coincidentally on January 17th, 2025. Well, in this sort of playbook, several hundred pages, USAID is mentioned several dozen times, including but not limited to admitting that they were planning to bankroll resistance to the democratic backsliding that was going to occur under President Trump through USAID. And the media example that they give is an entity called the Organized Crime and Corruption Reporting Project, which was responsible for essentially the dossier that led to the first impeachment of President Trump. So you can see this whole concept of depicting President Trump, Elon Musk, everything that they're doing as autocratic, as anti-democratic, as democratic backsliding. It then basically allows them to have a much broader and wider tool belt where they can oppose, sabotage, and obstruct, right, the Trump administration, but it also gets them out of their ideological sort of bend where how do they even oppose a democratically elected president as the staunch defenders of democracy that they purport to be?
Natalie Winters, Color Revolution. This is so important. Don't pay attention. 2/3 of the stuff you see on TV is nonsense. MSNBC, CNN. It's not the heart of the thing. The heart of the thing is a very sophisticated political operators that have been inside the administrative and deep state for many, many decades. They run the deal, okay? They are not prepared to give this up. They've spread their madness throughout the world. That's what we're choking off. And Norm Eisen is one of the biggest practitioners of this. Once again, Natalie, I just want to leave the audience before we go to another an aspect of this, which is the funding of it, and that's USAID, to tell me about the color revolution in Norm Eisen.
Yeah, no, what we're talking about, I mean, is the equivalent of like a nuclear bomb to the Constitution, to this country, to elections, certainly to the Trump agenda. And, you know, you always talk about the idea of they're not going to hand us over the keys. They're not going to say, congrats, here's a pat on the back. You won the election. Here you go. I think the concept of a color revolution, to sort of extend that metaphor, is the idea that those set of keys shouldn't even exist because the system is so foolproof, is so, you know, under lock and key that you can't even change it, right? That sort of is what the impeachment represented symbolically, the first impeachment, right? You can't deviate from what they call the Washington consensus. And if you look at the sort of three pillars of what undergirds the theory of color revolution, which Norm Eisen and his sort of mentor were the seminal authors of the text that really created the playbook. Number one was sort of mass demonstrations and mass street protests, which we're certainly seeing right now. But just pay attention how anytime that there is a protest, Rachel Maddow, the MSNBC crowd, they really, really, really amplify them and really, really hype it up because they want to create this idea, right? Even though it's actually not that many people, but they want to create the idea, this sort of astroturfed idea that there's such staunch opposition.
Hang on. To your point, it's amazing that from Nicole Wallace all the way through the evening, they'll have the multi-screen. They'll talk about, this is what's happening in Denver today. This is what's happening in Orlando. And they'll have the entire screen with each of the different protests. And there's probably not 500 people at any one, but when the screen's full, it reinforces to them that they're taken to the streets to take this back. It's information warfare perfected, ma'am.
Yeah, I mean, it's confirmation bias, right? It's straight up agitprop. They want the idea that there is such unrest in the United States and such massive opposition that there's just demonstration after demonstration after demonstration. When in reality, I've been walking, to and from the White House more or less every day, and it's typically like 3 people outside standing and screaming. It's not really these like mass organized demos. Believe me, that's what they want, and I'm sure they'll pay people to do it. But organically, it's not happening. The other component of the color revolution is impeachment proceedings, which obviously they can't actually do or carry out right now. But I would argue that is why they are so kind of clinically insane over what is going on in terms of the mass firings and layoffs, because they're essentially pulling the plug on their ability to have embeds within all of these agencies. And make no mistake, they're certainly teeing up the stage for if they were to take the House for another impeachment. But I think the other key point here, which goes back to sort of the autocratic framing of President Trump that we've been hammering for so long, is this idea of engineering contested election results. So part of that is their typical, trope of like, oh, well, President Trump lost the Electoral College, so he's not justifiably elected. But they sort of lost that card. So I think that that's sort of where, and obviously we have our issues with Elon Musk, but I think that that is sort of why you see this.
You mean not
narrative.
that he not that he lost not that he lost the electoral college, that he didn't win the popular vote. The new thing is they're all wigged out about the popular vote, right? Yeah, popular vote. You're right. Okay, continue on.
That rug was ripped out from underneath them because he won so overwhelmingly. So I think that their embrace of the critiques on Elon Musk as, the shadow president, as President Musk, as the person who's commandeering the White House, really sort of, I think, through a roundabout way, accomplishes that goal, that idea that it's not actually President Trump who's running the show. It's this merry band of idiots that is Doge, right? And even the critiques on the fact that the Doge staffers are so young, it's trying to create illegitimacy around that organization. While, just for example, that Jen Psaki segment that we played opening the show, in the same segment where they're bashing Doge staffers for being 19, they're then having David Hogg on to say that the Democrat Party needs to be run by younger Gen Zers, right? So ideologically, it doesn't really square. So that's sort of the equivalent. And like you were saying, Steve, and if after this we can play the USAID clip, but I view my role as the White House. Sure, go ahead.
No, keep going. I want to hold. By the way, Denver, I want to hold the clip. I got something I want to put at the end for you to comment on. Keep going.
Well, to your point about how my role as a White House correspondent, I think, is unique, besides the obvious reasons to everyone else in that room, is that it really gives me a front row seat to the mainstream media, which is sort of the core, I would say, ground shock troops of this whole resistance effort. So obviously covering the White House and the press conferences is important, but what amazing access to have to understand how they're formulating the narratives. And that's what I view my role as.
I want to go, so folks, get number two. We've talked about this before, but it's a number 2 Princeton Day. Autocratic breakthrough, because this is their new concept that they're trying to hammer and use in the media. Autocratic breakthrough, what do they mean? Why is it an important concept to them to try to pin on President Trump in the days of thunder, ma'am?
Well, it's the framing of President Trump as an autocrat, right? Like that is what it goes back to, because if they smear him as that, in the same way, it's basically the color revolution iteration of the 2016 ad hominem attacks of you're a racist, you're a sexist, so therefore I can assault you, I can punch you, I can get away with doing anything I want to you. This is the political warfare equivalent, right? Because you're an autocrat, because you're a dictator, I can remove you from office. And they're not exactly shy about it. It's very systemic and planned out. And it goes all the way back to, put it this way, our conspiracy theories, in quotes, have always been better than theirs. Their conspiracy theories come from the ivory tower of academia. This idea of democratic backsliding, Ziblatt and Levitsky, they're now rolling that out right now in real time, live fire exercise in the name of democracy.